finally, after all this time of speculations, after all this time of thinking, is this Arthas? What could happen with Arthas? When will Arthas show up? Arthas. We actually have some hints in the 9.1 PTR. Of course, spoilers ahead, but not big ones. It's not like we have a data mined model of the Lich King, but there is some half-concrete information from the Sepulchre of the First One's encounter that strongly hints that Arthas may at least have a small appearance within this expansion, but obviously it could also turn into a really big role later on. First, I was a bit skeptical about this wallet, but Ridge, the sponsor of this video, sent it to me about a year and a half ago, and really, I've not used any other wallet since then. It is actually great. You can put 12 cards inside, and you can put cash here as well, and there are over 30 colors and styles you can choose from. Check out my link in the description to get a 10% discount with code DORON and get your own Ridge wallet. Since the start of the Shadowlands, all of us expected to see Arthas. Arthas was literally the key point in that cinematic Afterlife Bastion, and all of us were shocked that it has been a year since the expansion was released and there's still nothing. To be honest, I believe that 9.1 was going to be the perfect opportunity for him to show up, as we got into the most inner chamber of the Jailer, the Sanctum of Domination, yet we scoured through the entire thing. We saw Ner'zhul, we saw even Garrosh, we saw a bunch of random people, yet there were no signs of the Fallen Prince that was apparently the most important agent of the Jailer before he got control of Sylvanas. Well, it turns out that my theory on the video I made months ago may just be completely right. Now, there is actually a really high chance that Arthas is inside that blade that was given to Anduin called King's Mourn. This was a pretty popular speculation, as that crystal that the Jailer took in the cinematic that he imbued the blade with has been a mystery up to this point, but most of us narrowed it down either to Arthas or Varian, and both made sense. And while there is still a bit of dilemma, let us actually dive into the information that we have, and let me explain why I think this is almost for sure Arthas. So, as you might have probably already heard, you don't even need to read the PTR stuff. Blizzard told us in the Eternity's End developer preview that we'll face against Anduin in the Sepulchre in the final raid of the expansion. Well, this encounter was data mined to an extent, and we can sort of see what is going to happen, how everything is going to unfold. Obviously, without a doubt, there will be at least in-game cinematics here, as well as other bits of story that will make sense, but here is what we currently have. So, as you know, Anduin is under the control of the Jailer, very firmly under the control of the Domination magic. The entire encounter is literally just us saving Anduin. We're supposed to aid him in regaining his willpower, which in turn allows him to manifest the source of magic controlling him, which ends up summoning as the entity called the Remnant of the Fallen King. Now, immediately you may be thinking, well, damn, that's not exactly that great of a hint. That's not going to help us decide whether it is Varian or Arthas, as Varian was also a king and he literally fell in battle, and in fact Arthas wasn't even a king, he was a prince, but in the end he was a Lich King that ultimately fell. So this doesn't really narrow it down all that much, as with these hints it can really go either way. However, luckily we have a few other bits of information that we can draw a few more parallels with, and that can help us here in this entire speculation. So the fight is obviously in stages, as in almost any boss fight, and the first stage is literally called King's Mourn Hungers. Seeing that his blade is King's Mourn, you know, Frostmourne, if you never heard the line Frostmourne Hungers, you probably don't have much experience with Warcraft in general. So just this fact alone is a huge hint. The phase being named King's Mourn Hungers, it is literally one of the most iconic lines that Arthas ever used. However, there is even more concrete information that connects this to Arthas. During a different phase, the Remnant of the Fallen King literally gets summoned or manifested in some way. It is a complete kit, which I'm guessing we either fight him, but let's look at a few of the abilities. The Fallen King has mostly Death Knight abilities, and he also has two spells that were literally in the Lich King encounter called Soul Reaper and Remorseless Winter. Now, I don't know about you, but for me this seems almost like an official confirmation from Blizzard. Why would the Remnant of the Fallen King, Lich King, use the same spells as the Lich King used in his final battle? Sure, I know these might just be references to the Lich King, but with both the spells and the phase names, I think it is just too much to really be just a coincidence. In turn, there don't seem to be any references to Varian in this encounter, at least at this point. Also, in the battle, it is confirmed that the Remnant Soul is literally linked to Anduin and it is his source of domination. Honestly, all this obviously makes sense. It turns out our theory was true and that the Jailer literally took the Soul Crystal because, as you know, he keeps them in his vault, and Uther obviously threw Arthas into the maw and gave his soul directly to the Jailer. Honestly, I would be surprised if Arthas never showed up. I know Blizzard isn't exactly super strict when it comes to loose ends and leaving unfinished stories and clues, but in this case, they literally made a cinematic at the start of the expansion. He is a really big character, and this must obviously manifest in the end to make some sense. However, there is another theory, because remember at the end of 9.1 we saw that compass, the compass that Varian used in the Legion cinematic. Obviously Blizzard is also hinting at Varian Brin, otherwise they wouldn't include that famous compass. They even paused it at the end of the 9.1 cinematic. So what if the Remnant is literally like an amalgamation? It is both Varian and Arthas, like the Jailer combined souls into some type of monstrosity in order to hold Anduin. It really wouldn't be unusual. He does this all the time. He took two very powerful souls, which is why the hold on Anduin was so strong, despite Anduin having insanely powerful will so powerful that he could summon the light within the maw. Might sound a bit ridiculous, but I don't think it is impossible. It would also explain why Uther was manipulated to throw Arthas' soul into the maw. It must have been really powerful and it was like his strongest source of domination magic, so the Jailer just needed it. However, all things are pointing that this is most likely going to be Arthas, and Varian might play some type of a role, but we don't have any hints in regards to Anduin's father at this point. Now, honestly, I don't really know how I feel about this. On one end, I definitely want to see Arthas in the Shadowlands, and I'm kinda hoping that he might save this story. On the other end, I'm really scared that they're going to just use him as a last resort and would completely butcher him, which would definitely be a tragedy, as Arthas is one of the most iconic and best written characters in the entire series, just hands down. I think him just being a part of this, sort of indirectly, might even be the best approach, although I'd like for them to at least give him some more screen time than they did to Garrosh, for example. Obviously, Sylvanas is also going to play a role in this entire storyline, and Jaina is also present in the raid and the entire patch, so the connection between these two characters with Arthas may be more important, and there should obviously be some sort of an interaction. Furthermore, we can learn what exactly was the link between Arthas and the Jailer. Was Arthas rebellious and wanted to break free from the Jailer like he broke from the Legion, or was he just a mindless servant like Anduin is at the moment? My guess is that it is the first one, because Arthas seemed remorseful in the end and he said darkness is waiting for him, as in it is a negative thing. It's not like, wow, I can't wait to be finally reunited with the Jailer. So it is entirely possible that we will free Anduin. We might also ultimately free Arthas, which could, if written right, be a really good storyline. It could be brief, but there could be an entire bit about us finally freeing the Prince that all those years ago fell as he took on Frostmourne, and now he could finally have some peace. Thank you for watching. Check out who's the next arbiter by clicking on the screen, and check out the Runs Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.